Hello there. Welcome into a Friday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. I do very much appreciate it. That app, by the way, free to download, free to use, and is sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. It will be a veritable cornucopia of sports topics over the course of the program, and I'd love to get your thoughts at 719-247-1313. There you could call or text it in, or you could find me on Twitter at Gingerly Tweets. I don't know if what happened last night with the Dallas Stars makes you feel that much better if you're an Avs fan. Or I'll put it this way. What happened with the Stars last night, I think makes you feel good if you're an Avalanche fan, but maybe doesn't totally make up for the fact that the Avalanche lost to the Stars again in the playoffs. It's like the scene from The Office where Kevin goes, it's just nice to win one. It feels, if you're an Avs fan, it feels like a win. Edmonton ultimately won the game. But in some small way, it's the victory of Avs fans as well. To see the Dallas Stars completely implode. And when I say that they imploded, I'm not actually talking about the players. Because last night was pretty much in line with how that whole series went. I didn't see the Stars being demonstrably worse in any way, shape, or form. By the Stars imploding, I mean Pete DeBoer. What was shocking last night was the decision made by Pete DeBoer to pull Jake Ottinger after he gave up 2 goals on 2 shots. For context, though, got to be fair. First one was on the power play. The second one was a breakaway. As good as Jake Ottinger is, those aren't usually goals that you hang on your goalie. But he pulled them anyway. Surprising. Desperate. But you can in some way say it ignited the team. I mean, Dallas did end up scoring 3 goals after that. The problem was that by replacing Jake Ottinger with Casey DeSmith, who is most known for not being a better goalie than Jake Ottinger, you're prone to give up more goals, and they did. And that's the risk you run when you pull your goalie, right? Yeah, it may spark something in your team, but you're also leaving yourself vulnerable because you don't have your better goalie in net. I don't believe that it was the right decision. And you look at some of the numbers, because I saw this flying around social media last night. The numbers back up that this works. Like last season, backup goalies who replaced starters in the middle of a game had both a higher save percentage and a lower GAA. So it works, but it doesn't work all the time. And you still should use it with great care. And when you do it matters. Right? So it's not a no-risk decision, even if the numbers will tell you that it does tend to give teams a bump. And where you have to be careful is when you are embarrassing your franchise goaltender, which it had to have. And the optics of Ray Ferraro, the man between the glass broadcasting the game, sitting right next to Jake Ottinger, talking about Jake Ottinger getting pulled, that's embarrassing. You don't think Jake Ottinger knew that the camera was on him? So it's, I guess it's one of those analytics versus the human element arguments that we tend to have in sports. Like, yeah, the numbers will tell you, will give your team a boost. But there are goalies that you really need to be careful about doing it. And Jake Ottinger, they would not be in that series without Jake Ottinger. They wouldn't. Jake Ottinger is the biggest reason why the Stars beat the Avalanche. Even, you could argue even more than Mikko Rantanen. You really could. I don't agree with the decision in the moment, and certainly in hindsight, it didn't get the desired result in terms of getting a win and keeping your season alive. And I said this because Pete DeBoer has done this before. He did this to Ottinger in Game 4 against the Avs. And at that time, I was like, I don't know about this. Now, I was wrong. Jake Ottinger bounced back okay. Just fine. But this is a much bigger stage. And he pulled him very early. What Pete DeBoer did last night was desperate. It was people throwing out the Patrick Waugh thing, and we'll see how Jake Ottinger responds to all of this. But Patrick Waugh got lit up. Like, let's not forget, in Montreal, he got absolutely destroyed and then was pulled. Jake Ottinger gave up 2 goals 7 minutes into the game. Not great, but also those goals weren't really on him, and it was 2, not 9. So you knew Pete DeBoer was going to have to explain his reasoning. I'm not the only one that was having that reaction as it was going on. But here comes the implosion. Here's the thing that's the most shocking. It's not pulling Jake Ottinger at that stage of an elimination game. It's why Pete DeBoer pulled him.
I didn't take that lightly, and I didn't blame it all on Jake. But, the reality is if you go back to last year's playoffs, he's lost 6 to 7 games to Edmonton, and we gave up 2 shots on 2 goals in an elimination game. So, it was partly to spark our team and wake them up, and partly, knowing that, status quo had not been working, and that's a pretty big sample size.
Wow. As stunned as I was to see Jake Ottinger go to the bench less than 8 minutes into the game, I was even more stunned watching Pete DeBoer explain it. Because there is kind of and Jared Bednar is the king of this. When you pull your goalie, it is very important that in the post-game press conference, you lay no blame at your goaltender's feet. It is just supposed to be about igniting your team. It's a punishment, like you're using them as a sacrificial lamb, and you're sending a message to everybody else on the ice. Jared Bednar, if you notice, never, when he pulls a goalie, even Alexander Georgiev, who in his mind he had to be absolutely fed up with, never once laid any blame. In fact, he went out of his way to explain away some of the goals that Georgiev would give up. Pete DeBoer didn't follow that rule. Pete DeBoer put it on Jake Ottinger. Listening to that, he pulled Jake Ottinger because Jake Ottinger. More than anything else. Which begs the question, if you were ready for the hook that quickly, I'm sure it's not the way that Pete DeBoer drew it up, but if you had any inkling in your mind because of what he's talking about with the 6 of the last 7 games, if you had any inkling that if things went poorly, you would be yanking Jake Ottinger that early into the biggest game of the season, then why even start him? If you're that worried about his track record against the Edmonton Oilers and you're willing to pull him less than 8 minutes into the game, then just don't start the guy. You leave him out. You put him out there anyway. Clearly, he had very little faith that Jake Ottinger was going to deliver for him. In 2 shots in, he's seen enough. Why don't you just start Casey DeSmith? That is unbelievable. And just as an aside here, 7 games is not a large sample size. I don't know if we have to set a definition of large sample size. 7 games is not a large sample size. That's 1 playoff series worth of games. Jake Ottinger outside, even if let's take Pete DeBoer's word for it, okay? And you look at the numbers, and yeah, Jake Ottinger wasn't great in this series and wasn't great last year. How many games has Jake Ottinger played where he's arguably one of the best goalies in the league? I don't even know the number. It's got to be in the hundreds, right? Easily, okay? Maybe even bordering on 1,000. I don't know. It's more than 7. 7 games is the sample size that you're going, yeah, this is not my guy. And I get it. He's talking about games against the Edmonton Oilers. And Jake Ottinger probably hasn't played nearly hundreds of games against the Edmonton Oilers. But the guy for the vast majority of his career has been your franchise goaltender. You're supposed to have more belief in that guy, even if that particular matchup against Edmonton is not a great one for him. Also, this just in, going against Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl doesn't usually end well for any goalie in the league. So who do you trust to give you more of an opportunity to win? Even with Jake Ottinger's track record against the Oilers. You got to go best on best, man. But the part I can't get around is that he actually did the thing. He actually made it so much more about Jake Ottinger than his team. You know what is, by the way, a large sample size? 7 years. 7 years. And that is the amount of time in which Pete DeBoer has lost 6 conference final games as a head coach. So are we asking the right questions here? Are we asking, should we be asking if Jake Ottinger is not the guy, or should we be asking about Pete DeBoer? Jake Ottinger, it's 1 team, 7 games. Pete DeBoer, it's 3 teams, 7 years. What he did last night makes what he did to Marc-Andre Fleury, which led to Marc-Andre Fleury's agent doing the Photoshop of Marc-Andre Fleury with the giant Vegas Golden Knights sword through his back. Remember that? What he did to Jake Ottinger last night makes that look like he was doing Marc-Andre Fleury a favor. He chucked him right under the bus. Your best player, your franchise goaltender. You embarrassed him and then you tossed him under the bus. And I'm fighting the urge to be a prisoner of the moment here. Because as bad as Pete DeBoer's track record has been in conference finals, I do understand that he is as accomplished as any NHL head coach. So it's that old thing of if you're going to fire your head coach, you better have a better candidate lined up, or the guy you're firing has to be so toxic, Michael Malone, that you're almost better. It's almost an addition by subtraction. I can't quite figure out where I have Pete DeBoer at this point. Because even as I try to go, okay, I'm not going to overreact. Okay, it's bad. It's all bad. But is it a fireable offense what Pete DeBoer did last night? But then I say, what's going to be the relationship with Jake Ottinger moving forward? How will that be perceived by the rest of the Dallas Stars? Because the old guard is kind of going out in Dallas, right? Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, these guys are going to be gone. It's Mikko Rantanen's team. It's Jake Ottinger's team. Mikko Rantanen just got there. How do you think he would have reacted if Pete DeBoer would have done something similar to him? It's going to be a different Dallas Stars team moving forward. I'm not so sure that everything, including the loss, by the way, again to Edmonton. I mean, there are people out here making the case that Jared Bednar losing to the Stars again was a fireable offense. Well, here's Pete DeBoer, who lost to Edmonton again and did it in such an embarrassing way, embarrassing his goalie and then chucking him under the bus. I'm not so sure this isn't a fireable offense. That was breathtaking. That entire evening, that entire confluence of events. And again, doesn't make up for the Avalanche losing to the Stars, but if you would have known at the time that last night would happen, this series with Edmonton would happen, where Mikko Rantanen gets completely shut out, Jake Ottinger gets embarrassed, Pete DeBoer has a meltdown, and the Stars get dominated, doesn't make up for it. But again, as Kevin Malone would say, feels nice to win one. 719-247-1313, just getting going with this Friday edition of the show. Coming up next, David Adelman means business. He's not messing around, making some changes. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. This is starting to become a little bit more than a little reset for the Denver Nuggets. Josh Kroenke the other day saying they just need a little reset, not a culture change. Somebody has to explain to me the difference, because David Adelman not messing around. Multiple assistant coaches gone, including defensive coordinator Ryan Saunders, Popeye Jones, Stephen Graham, former OK State great, and Charles Klask, all gone. Ryan Bowen apparently safe. Now, those assistants I just mentioned, this is like a Calvin Booth-like firing where their contracts were expiring and they're just not going to pick them up. But David Adelman, like, he may come across as maybe a little meek. You know, he's letting the players kind of lead themselves, and all the jokes about how Joker now has to coach the team himself and everything. Well, David Adelman, his first couple of orders of business have been to, without naming names, call out Jamal Murray with him in the room about getting in shape before the season starts. And then he says goodbye to a handful of assistant coaches. So David Adelman not messing around. But this also isn't that surprising. Like, the logic behind, just because David Adelman, that Venn diagram, right? There are Adelman guys, there are Malone guys. David Adelman happens to be a Malone guy. But how big is that middle piece to where Michael Malone and David Adelman would agree on some of these guys? The Ryan Saunders thing, I guess, is maybe the most surprising to me, because it seemed like they were working together a lot. But you heard David Adelman the other day mention how they're going to change some stuff up defensively, more zone, and maybe Ryan Saunders isn't really in tune to that. And I also think too that it's not unreasonable to think that with some of the irritation, I suppose is the way I would put it, that players were feeling, how they were graded on a little bit by Michael Malone, you don't think that extends to some of the assistant coaches? But this is a culture change. It's semantics. Like, maybe the peer-to-peer relationships, player to player is okay. But when you replace most of your coaching staff and your front office, that's a culture change. I mean, it just is. It's a culture change. And if Josh Kroenke is going to not let the new GM pick his head coach, the least he could do is let David Adelman pick his own staff. And it'll be interesting. We don't spend as much time looking at assistant NBA coach hires as we do NFL assistants. Maybe we will with this one, just because of the stakes right now with the Denver Nuggets. We will pay attention to every little thing that they do this offseason. But I would be curious to see who they're looking for and what they're good at. I would imagine you're going to see player development mentioned a lot on some of these guys' resumes. You think like an Andre Miller coaching the G League team right now, that's all about player development. Maybe he gets promoted and becomes an assistant. I know the Celtics are about as well respected when it comes to player development as anybody. Blaine Mueller is coaching their G League team, maybe a name to watch out for. I'm mostly just throwing these out based on where I think David Adelman might be looking. Wes Unseld Jr. used to coach in Denver. He is Billy Donovan's top assistant in Chicago, so that would be kind of a lateral move for him. So I don't know if that would be in it, but I think what you're looking for is the archetype. Right? Player development. They'll want to load up the staff with guys with a track record. Could we see like a college head coach? Bolt. We know that more college coaches every day are like, forget this nonsense. I'm gone. If I want to coach in the NBA, I'll just go coach in the NBA, and then they do. So maybe we might get a head coach, a D1 head coach, but it will be a lot of player development, and then replacing Ryan Saunders. David Adelman's an offensive guy. So that's maybe where you see a bigger name. When they do hire their assistants, the name you recognize might be somebody with a defensive background. So we'll see where David Adelman goes here. But I think this is about David Adelman and Michael Malone not seeing eye to eye on everything, which is normal. So we wouldn't just run it back with the same assistants. And perhaps more of an eye towards player development coaches. Because that is the thing that this organization is still very much wanting to do. That has become abundantly clear. The vision Calvin Booth had, what his ideas to perpetuate the Nuggets' success were shared by Josh Kroenke, and he's going to continue that. As is David Adelman. But don't lose sight of the big picture here. General manager. That's what we're waiting for. Okay, hires David Adelman. That's significant. David Adelman letting most of his assistants go. All right, somewhat notable. The GM. That's what we're waiting on. And I want to spin it forward a little bit because we put so much into this offseason, and for good reason, in saying how you need an outside hire, you need a fresh set of eyes and all of that kind of stuff, because you have to decide now if you're going to trade Michael Porter or Jamal Murray and what you're going to do with this roster. But let's not forget Josh Kroenke talking about the 1, the 3, and the 5. They're going to have a longer-term view on things than they have previously. And in that vein, let's be honest about it, the chances that the Nuggets make a significant move this offseason are small. Can we just agree on that? We can throw out all these fun trades, and it's fun to do, and I like doing it as much as anybody else. They're probably not changing much of this roster. Can't, won't, they're not going to. But look into the future here. Josh Kroenke's not just making a decision to hire a new GM for this offseason, which is important. But think of some of the decisions that are coming up. If the Nuggets are largely going to be status quo when it comes to the roster, really the one big piece of business is going to be to get Nikola Jokic to sign his extension, which Josh Kroenke could do on his own. Right? Get somebody to crunch the numbers, draw it up, and then Josh Kroenke's the one flying to Serbia to get Nikola Jokic to sign it. It's a significant piece of business, but it's a piece of business that I don't think they need the outside eyes or a GM in place. Josh Kroenke could probably do that. But you look beyond that. After next season, Christian Braun is ready for a payday. And they're going to be in this weird thing where Christian Braun is due to get paid a year before Michael Porter's contract is off the books. So are they just going to blindly pay Christian Braun and then let Michael Porter walk for nothing? Because we keep talking about how restrictive the salary cap is in the second apron and all this kind of stuff. And then the Nuggets are going to willingly sign another player to a big contract. I don't see it. So, okay, maybe Michael Porter stays on the roster this year, but I don't see how right now that both Christian Braun and Michael Porter can get fair market value from Denver while still paying Gordon, Murray, and Jokic. I have a hard time envisioning Christian Braun and Michael Porter being on this team, say, 3 years from now, together. I could see one of them. Both would be difficult, especially without making some other moves. And Peyton Watson's a restricted free agent at the same time Christian Braun is. If Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric opt in for this next year, they're going to be UFAs the year after next season. So one way or another, the Nuggets will open up a little bit of space depending on what they do then with Christian Braun. But my point here is there are other decisions down the road that this GM hire is going to have to make. So if Josh Kroenke's taking a longer-term view, yeah, we need to as well and say, let's not focus so much right now on what the Nuggets do this offseason because it's very likely they do little to nothing. But they'll have draft picks back in the fold starting after next season. They have another big money decision to be made on Christian Braun. They'll be losing some of their bench players. And if next season ends in a similar fashion to the last two, then there will be a lot of heat, even more so on this organization to do something significant. So we've been focusing on this offseason, but this is a GM hire for years to come. In the roster issues that they have and the lack of depth and everything, it's not going to be, even if they do something significant this offseason, not going to be fixed overnight. Not in one offseason. So all this other stuff with assistant coaches and removing the interim tag from David Adelman, that's all well and good, and that's necessary business. But the GM, what's going on there? Because pretty soon the GM is going to have to do something. And I'm not just talking about like the somethings that we're suggesting. I'm saying the offseason is going to begin here in the next 10 days. They got to have somebody in place by then, you would think. 719-247-1313. We'll stick with basketball coming up next. We will get at least one more night of the Eastern Conference Finals, which means another night of inside the NBA, but their move off of TNT, it's coming up. And I'm not buying what the Inside the NBA crew is selling. That's coming up here on Extra Sports 1300. We will at least get one more episode of Inside the NBA on TNT as the Knicks stayed alive last night in the Eastern Conference Finals. But with the possibility that last night could have been it, Shaq made a very bold prediction.
Yes, it is the ending of the Inside the NBA on TNT, but it's the new beginning for us. I'm glad we're still together on whatever network we go to, and whatever network we're coming to, we bring in the pain. Just letting you know right now. Okay, I know everybody's sad that, it ain't going to be the show. The show is still here, baby. You can never kill the four horsemen. We coming, and we coming to take spots, we coming to kick ass, and we coming to take names.
Take names!
And we doing it our way.
Hey.
I hope he's right. I do. I hope he's right, but it's not going to be the same. It just won't. You know, one of my favorite shows is Arrested Development. And on Fox, it was one of the best shows in the history of mankind. And that is not hyperbolic. Watch the show. It's amazing. Then it goes to Netflix. Different feel. Now, that's over-the-air television to streaming, and this is cable to cable, so maybe it won't be as jarring of a change. But even you look at some shows, Scrubs, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, like they switch networks, and it just, the look of it, the feel of it, it was just different. And I don't have the utmost faith in the worldwide leader to do right by this gem of a television show. I just don't. And I know they're bringing their whole crew and all of that kind of stuff, but it just, I don't know. I mean, part of me hopes, a lot of me hopes that they go in there and they raise the level of discourse, because most of what's on that television station right now is just the worst sports television you can get. It just is. But the saying isn't that one rising boat raises the tide, right? The tide is ESPN. The tide is Pat McAfee and First Take. And maybe this show can be an oasis from that kind of stuff. But I can't help but feel like some of the ESPN influence is going to creep in a bit. You know, is Stephen A. Smith going to be sitting on that show at some point? Is Be Still My Heart. Is Kendrick Perkins going to be allowed on that set? It just, and they're still going to be allowed, I think, to poke a little bit of fun. I don't think it's going to be this buttoned up corporate, oh, you can't say anything, because one thing that ESPN embraces more than anything is their personalities being a part of the story. See recent news events for what I'm talking about. They love it. So if Charles Barkley is taking shots at Kendrick Perkins or at Stephen A. Smith or anybody on ESPN, that they're not going to temper that. They'll like that. But I just, you know, ESPN on the heels of canceling Around the Horn, I worry. I do. I don't think it's going to be the same. And I don't begrudge anybody for continuing to collect a paycheck. I don't, but in some ways you got to let some things die. Right? And we talk about this in television all the time, or movies. How many movie series went one movie too long? One season too long on the television side of things. It happens all the time. And this is, you know what I worry this is? This is the inside the NBA jump the shark moment. Not anything that they're doing. Like, this decision was not made for them. They just have to go along with it. And it's nothing from a content perspective, like when, if you don't understand the reference, when the Fonz jumped a literal shark on Happy Days. Just the move to ESPN and ESPN getting inside the NBA. I don't like it. But inside the NBA, that and baseball tonight, back when ESPN had great sports programming, every time it was on, I had to watch. Even into baseball tonight I went away from because of the product, but also because of the sport they're covering. I care less and less about every day. But inside the NBA, still to this day, best sports show on television. And I'm going to give it a shot when it goes over to ESPN, and I hope it works. I really do. I hope Shaq's right. But I worry because the worldwide leader has a way of ruining a lot. I appreciate them putting all the games on for us. But when it's not a game, it's hard to turn that network on. It really is. As far as the game last night, look, I wouldn't put too much panic into things if I'm a Pacer fan. I mean, that was pretty obvious what that situation was last night. The Knicks were desperate, backs against the wall, playing for their season on their home floor. You could see that coming. Right? I mean, I thought that the Pacers could still win, but it's not a surprising outcome. Even the final score, even the margin of victory wasn't super surprising to me. And I was prepared to sit here and say, I'm not worried about it. I wouldn't be worried about it if I'm a Pacers fan. You get to go home, still finish it out before it even gets to a game 7. But then I heard Pascal Siakam. I heard him in the post game, and I don't know that I feel that way. Take a listen.
How is that possible?
What do you mean?
How is it possible to not fight hard enough in game 2?
What are you talking about? They played harder than us. It's okay. We played hard, but they played harder. What's your point? I don't get it.
My point is, you're saying you guys got outfought, and I'm saying
That happens in a game, though. That's basketball.
in game 5 we didn't make playoffs.
You're good? You're good, bro? You're looking for something, I know. But damn. No, but I'm telling you, though. I told you. What else you want me to tell you?
Well, what you tell me how. That's all I'm asking.
Well, what about you tell me? So go ahead. Who's this guy? Who's this guy? What's your name, bro? Oh.
I don't like that. Now, for context, and why most people are backing up Pascal Siakam is because that was Greg Doyle, if you didn't hear him identified at the end of it. He was the one that got in trouble for being like super weird with Caitlin Clark when she arrived in Indiana. So he has a reputation. He had a reputation before the whole Caitlin Clark thing in Indianapolis. He likes to stir it up. So most people are jumping to the defense of Pascal Siakam. But I'm looking at a guy who lost a game that nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, most people would just dismiss. Okay, yeah, they're up 3-1. The Knicks got game 5. Big deal. Happens a lot in sports. Knicks are desperate. Credit to them. They won. And that's what Pascal Siakam should have said, and not even using as many words as I did. Like, just like answer the question. How does that happen? They were the more desperate team. They were playing on their home floor. We'll be better. We'll raise our desperation level for game 6. That's it. All done. Not, are you good, bro? Who is this guy? Chuckling, being combative. That to me says that there are some cracks forming in the psyche of the Indiana Pacers that quite frankly don't need to be there. You have proven to overwhelm the New York Knicks. You are such a bad matchup for them. You're going home for game 6, not even game 7. You got all the cushion you need to finish off this series. Why are you engaging like that? Because clearly Pascal Siakam doesn't know of Greg Doyle's history, right? It just, to him, it's a random reporter that's asking him, how does it happen that you're not playing as hard as you need to when you have a chance to close it out? And I get it. Greg Doyle's trying to, get a good quote. Like, I've been in enough of those rooms. There are people who maybe don't tone down the tone of their question. I get that, and it can wear on players, but he just kept going on and on and on. And it's like, I still think that the Pacers end up winning this series. I don't think that tomorrow night is a must win for them. Like some people are saying, that's easy to say. The Pacers have gone into New York multiple times in this series and won. So tomorrow night's not a must win. It would be really good if you did, to just avoid game 7 altogether. But it's not must win. But if they lose, I'm going to be tuning in for the post game. Because I can't help but feel like maybe that loss, the way they lost, affected, if Pascal Siakam in some way, and he's their second best player, is somewhat indicative of the rest of the team. They're taking that loss a little bit harder than maybe they need to, getting a little too defensive after a performance that is quite easy to explain away. Hear players do it all the time. So that game 6 in Indianapolis is tomorrow night. The Oklahoma City Thunder chilling on their couch. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, why the Broncos roster may be one of the best in all the National Football League. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on a Friday. Ryan Kaufman with you, and I appreciate being with you. Appreciate you watching the show on our social media platforms at Extra Sports 1300. If you'd like to reach out, interact, feel free. 719-247-1313 is the text and phone line. You could do either. Or you could tweet me at Gingerly Tweets. You know, you really got to hand it to the Paytons. You really do. And this is not a backhanded compliment, even though it's going to sound like one. So George Payton messed up royally by trading for Russell Wilson, right? Like, that's abundantly clear. But what he was doing in the meantime was actually laying a really good young foundation for this Broncos team. And then you add Sean Payton, who can make some better decisions when it comes to NFL players. And they've built up a roster that is held in very high regard across the league. In fact, both Pro Football Focus, NFL.com listed the Broncos as one of the 10 best rosters in the league. And look at the number of players that it looks like they've hit on. Pat Surtain, Quinn Meinerz, and Jonathan Cooper in 21. Now Nick Bonito, 2022. 2023, they get Marvin Mims, Drew Sanders. Don't forget about him. Sean Payton says he'll play inside linebacker, which I've always thought is his best position, so it's nice to hear that. And then you get Riley Moss, who I like a lot better when Jahdae Barron is in that secondary with him. And then, of course, you get Bo Nix. And Bo Nix has actually led to the Broncos being able to strengthen their roster. Because Tulanoa Hufanga yesterday, one of the newest members of the Broncos, said Bo Nix was one of the reasons why he signed. Not Bo Nix, maybe specifically the person, but the fact that the Denver Broncos have a young quarterback that could be a franchise guy. And you look around the league, there aren't a lot of teams right now that have the optimism surrounding the quarterback position the way that the Denver Broncos do. And Hufanga is not the first player to shout out Bo Nix as a reason why they came to Denver. Bo Nix, in true Bo Nix fashion, kind of shucks the whole thing.
Well, that's nice of them to say, but I, just let the front office do their thing, and I feel like, Coach Payton and George, they put together a great squad for us this year, and so my job is to, when they get here, just make them a part of the team and help them with the transition. And I feel like all the new guys have, really bought in, and they've been around. They've been, getting to know everybody, and we got really good pickups this offseason. So I'm excited to see them play.
Part of the reason why I think that this Broncos roster is being complimented the way it is, once Sean Payton arrived, they did very much build it the right way. Right? They didn't draft a quarterback before they got the offensive line. Now, part of it is because they needed to have Sean Payton get his eyes on Russell Wilson and make that determination, because they didn't want to have to draft a quarterback. But you look at when Sean Payton arrived, fortified the trenches, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. People like that. You build from the trenches. You win the game in the trenches. So the Broncos did that as kind of the first order of business. Then they put the young quarterback behind it. And now they're taking a young roster and aging it a little bit by identifying free agents that will help them improve. And they bring in Ingram, and they bring in Hufanga, and they bring in Dre Greenlaw, all at positions that were positions of need. So the Denver Broncos have very much built this thing up the way that people that cover the league like teams to be built up. And the most important aspect of all of it is Bo Nix. Because I promise you, the Broncos wouldn't be showing up on top 10 roster lists if it was Drew Lock at quarterback. Because we've seen this before. We've seen the Denver Broncos have a roster that you look at and you look everywhere other than quarterback and you're like, they got a lot of talent. And they have. They've had a lot of talent at other positions over the years. Just take the roster they had after Peyton Manning retired. They still had all their pass rushers. Had the no-fly zone. But they had Trevor Siemian, and that was an issue. Part of the reason the Broncos are included on this list, and I looked at the NFL.com list. If I could pull it back up here. Tell me what all these, well, I've already given you the answer, but just listen to what all of these teams have in common. Philadelphia, Baltimore, Detroit, Kansas City, Buffalo, Minnesota, Tampa Bay, Green Bay, San Francisco, Denver. All of those teams feel like or actually have, they feel like they may have a franchise quarterback on the roster or they already do. Right? Vikings with J.J. McCarthy. I'm not as big on J.J. McCarthy as some other people, but it's a good roster. In fact, Minnesota just extended their general manager because of the work he's done. But you have Brock Purdy, you have Patrick Mahomes, you have Lamar Jackson. Not that they're all in the same conversation. But it seems like the first barrier for entry onto a list like this is, do they have something at quarterback? And for the Denver Broncos, they do. And this is what you hope for as an NFL team building out their roster, right? You hope that you're able to have enough when you draft a rookie quarterback that you can provide him that scaffolding while he's young and cheap to be able to develop him, because in no time at all, this roster is going to get more and more expensive. And we got a while before Bo Nix is going to cash in. But I'm even talking about like Nick Bonito getting ready to cash in. If they're planning on paying Cortland Sutton, he's going to make more money, right? Like the roster is going to get more expensive and maybe get worse in some ways pretty quickly. This is about as good of a roster as the Broncos are going to have Bo Nix's entire career. Because eventually he's going to get paid. But also, if the Broncos keep winning, other guys are going to be set for paydays, and that's going to either mean that those players are gone. Think of like a Zach Allen. You know, what's his future? So this is about as good as the Broncos roster is going to get. But the bet you make when you remove that scaffolding and the Broncos don't have as much talent at every single position is that Bo Nix is ready to carry you more than he is right now. It's very difficult. Everybody says, oh, you got the key is to win a Super Bowl when the quarterback's on the rookie deal. Okay, well, I saw Matthew Stafford win a Super Bowl. He wasn't on a rookie deal. I've seen Patrick Mahomes win multiple. He's not on a rookie deal. Jalen Hurts just won. He's not on a rookie deal. So, yeah, I get it. It's the goal. It's the dream. Does it actually happen? We give Tom Brady all the credit for taking all these pay cuts. He was still making more than a rookie quarterback does. To me, it's just more, do you have enough around Bo Nix, while he is on his rookie deal, to get him to his payday, which he's inevitably going to get unless he crashes out in the next couple of years. He's going to get paid because every quarterback does. And then it's going to cost you more and more on your roster. It doesn't mean your talent around him is going to be gone, but it'll be less. Even Mahomes has dealt with this, has lost players at key spots. It's just a reality. But the Broncos have quite quickly built this roster up. And it's balanced. Now, still, their defense is much better than their offense, because if there is one thing I would point at with the Broncos roster to talk about a flaw, it is the skill positions. But at least they have Evan Ingram. But that's what wins in the NFL, balance. Not one side of the football having to constantly pick up for the other. On paper, this team has that balance. We'll see if it actually manifests itself and plays out during this season, because the Broncos offense lagged a little bit behind the defense last year. But the Paytons, you got to hand it to them. Doesn't mean it ultimately works out and that gets them to where they need to go. But I don't disagree with these lists that I'm seeing, unlike other lists I've seen recently. It's good roster. We'll see if it pays dividends this year for the Denver Broncos. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, I don't know about you. I'm having withdrawals. It's QB competition withdrawals. Like, I don't know what to do with this show. So let's go to Cleveland coming up next here on Extra Sports 1300. I can say all I want that I'm glad that we don't have to go through another Broncos training camp battle at the quarterback position, but then I see what's going on in Cleveland, and I'm like, kind of miss it. Kind of miss it. It brought meaning to this time in the NFL calendar, right? It's OTAs. Come on now. I get we're football starved, but there's only so much you can get out of OTAs unless you're just one of those RJ Harvey. Whoa. And I'm not. I'm not. We got levels to go before I take what I see from any Denver Broncos players as a sign of good or bad things. But there's something about those quarterback competitions. Like every little thing is just like you can't help it. You can't help but put more into something than probably needs to be. And that's wisdom that only comes from going through this so much like I have. But I look at what's happening in Cleveland and I'm like, so they're freaking out that Shador the other day, they're charting the passes in an official graphic of how the four quarterbacks have done in an OTA practice. Freaking out that Shador leads them in touchdowns at OTAs. Not making fun. I'm not making fun. I'm sure we did all the same things. And at times, I'm a little bit jealous that we didn't have four quarterbacks that we could talk ourselves into being the starters. But I'll just reiterate this that I said the Monday after the NFL draft, because it seems like this is the time where people nationally are talking about this. So I'll just reiterate what I already said. Shador Sanders is going to play for the Cleveland Browns this year. OTA numbers aside, the Browns have got to play one of these two rookies. What point would there be to playing Joe Flacco for an entire season? And I think the Kenny Pickett hype is to the same type of hype that Sean Payton put on Zach Wilson. I think they want somebody to I think they would be willing to part with any of their quarterbacks if we're being honest about it. But I think Kenny Pickett seems like the Browns version of Zach Wilson. Like Kevin Stefanski says things about Kenny Pickett and raves about it, and I'm like, you saw Kenny Pickett play, right? Like, you're just doing this so somebody trades for him, right? Clear the deck a little bit. My guess is the Browns' depth chart at quarterback becomes Flacco, Shador, Dylan Gabriel. And once the season is lost, which shouldn't take the Browns too long, you will see Shador Sanders quarterbacking that team. Why in the world wouldn't you see it? Because we're done with the messages being sent and all that kind of stuff. Now it's just about football. Now it's just about how good these football players are. You sent your message to Shador. Now it's time, excuse me, to acknowledge that Shador is the most talented quarterback on your roster. Okay? Draft position doesn't matter anymore. Rack 'em and stack 'em. Shador Sanders is the most talented quarterback on the Cleveland Browns roster right now. And that's going to show itself out through this lead up to the season. And then at some point, Kevin Stefanski, wouldn't make any sense to not play one of the, I mean, you drafted two rookie quarterbacks. You got to play one of them at some point. Because if this Brown season goes the way that we all think it will, then they're going to be in a prime position to grab a quarterback in next year's draft. But don't you want to see what you have before you make the leap for an Arch Manning or a Garrett Nussmeier or whatever quarterback is going to catch your eye in the draft process next year? Like, everyone's kind of being coy and stuff, and I guess it's to build up the drama. Shedeur Sanders is going to play this year for the Cleveland Browns. Maybe not right away. He's going to play. And at the very least, he's better than Dylan Gabriel. Can we at least not make that a competition? Like, the best rookie on the roster is Shedeur. And then we go from there and say, okay, can he be better than Kenny Pickett, which I think he can be, but will he be ready to start an NFL game week 1? Probably not. That's why you have Joe Flacco. So give Joe Flacco a few games, see how it goes. I think their bye week is kind of smack dab in the middle of the season, if I'm remembering correctly. That's the normal part of the calendar where you decide to make a change at quarterback if you're going to. And then they're going to see what Shedeur Sanders has. And I think he has enough to be a starting quarterback in this league. Now, could he be caught in a situation where he plays, he shows some things, but then the Browns are drafting in the top 5 and they could get a great quarterback prospect coming out of this draft, and then Shedeur is surplus to requirements? That's entirely possible. Yeah, I got to be sold on Garrett Nussmeier of LSU. Like, I got to see more of him. I don't get the hype train around him. Arch Manning, I'm there. Maybe it's just because of the name and because of a few plays against CSU. But I think Arch Manning is going to be a better quarterback prospect than Shedeur. And if the Browns have a chance to draft him, then you draft him. I don't know if Shedeur is going to be able to show enough to where the Browns will sit out the draft in terms of quarterbacks next year. But he's playing this year. Like, I don't have this skin in the game the way that the media in Cleveland do. I don't have to drag this out. I can literally just say this now and then pick it back up weeks from now if I feel like it. I don't have to live and die on every day, every practice. So I'll just say it. Shedeur Sanders is playing. He will be Joe Flacco's backup to start the season, and then we'll go from there. We'll play by ear when he does eventually take over the reins. But his slide in the draft is not about talent. We overhyped him. I'm not going to rope you into this. I don't know how you felt about Shedeur. I overrated him as a prospect. I'll admit that now. But not overrate from round 1 to round 5, okay? And I'm not going to get back into everything that happened draft weekend and the motivation behind it. He's better than a 5th-round quarterback. So when I see people on NFL Network talking about there's no guarantee a 5th-round pick makes this is not your typical 5th-round pick. It's not. He's not an afterthought, Shedeur Sanders, like so many 5th-round picks are. He's a little bit more notable. He's more talented than a normal crop of 5th-round quarterbacks. I get, in theory, 5th round. Hey, I've seen 3rd-rounders cut before their rookie season. Like, I get that 5th-round picks have nothing guaranteed to them, which is all a part of this. It's all a part of why he slid in the draft. but he has to beat out maybe not even both of these guys. Maybe it's just one. But Dylan Gabriel and Kenny Pickett. Come on. Even the most conservative on Shador Sanders' abilities can recognize that he can at least beat out one of those two guys and probably can beat out both. But man, they're living and dying every throw of OTAs. I remember when we did that. Glad we're not there anymore. I am. I'm legitimately glad. But there are times that I do miss it. 719-247-1313. This also from the NFL today. Not nothing. Bryce Huff is getting traded to the 49ers. The Eagles finally gave up one of their pass rushers. They finally said, we have one too many. Now Bryce Huff is going to San Francisco. Will obviously get a chance to play more, have more of an impact. Opposite not Joey. I knew I was going to do that. Nick Bosa. Sneaky good pickup for the 49ers. And you know where I stand on San Fran. Everybody's sleeping on them. I'm not. People are out on them because they have to pay Brock Purdy now. I'm not out on them. I'm not. Especially in a division where, as much as I like Matthew Stafford, I ranked him the 5th best quarterback in the league. We know what happens to aging quarterbacks. Like, it could just leave Matthew Stafford all of a sudden. It could. We have the Rams. Give them their due. They're a really good team. They almost represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. But what do you got outside of that? Arizona and a team that's betting on a lightning striking twice with Sam Darnold. Don't write off San Francisco just yet. Hang on. Sneaky good pickup. I'm not really for pickups this time of year because I think that most of the important business has already been done. But you look, coming from Philadelphia, you know they have a plethora of pass rushers that they could probably afford to spin one off. And going to a team like the 49ers. The 49ers aren't as good as they once were, but I'm not counting them out of things in the NFC. Not yet. So Bryce Huff going to the San Francisco 49ers. And will even restructure his deal to help the Niners save money. Nice of him to do that. I don't know who the 49ers are going to use that money on, but a nice gesture nonetheless. 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. The first move of the offseason for the Colorado Avalanche has been made. Ilya Nabokov has signed a 2-year entry-level contract. Tell you a little bit about Ilya. He is a Russian goaltender. The Avs selected him, I believe, 38th overall a couple years ago. This is an organization that tends not to use premium draft capital on goalies, but this is a flat-out pro goalie that's been playing pro hockey. And he's been brought up a few times, especially when Georgiev was really struggling at the beginning of the year. And everybody was desperate to find an answer to the goaltending position. His name kind of reemerged. Obviously, no spot for him. And then the Avs go out and they make the moves that they do. And I don't think even Ilya Nabokov is going to be on the Avalanche this year at any point. Now, Scott Wedgwood is going to be a free agent after this upcoming season. So this time next year, I think we really start to have a conversation about Ilya Nabokov. Unless the Avs trade him. Because the Avs have done that recently quite a bit when it comes to their top prospects. They traded Cal Ritchie in the Brock Nelson deal, and now Ilya Nabokov becomes their best prospect. Ideally, they would hang on to him. Because as good as Mackenzie Blackwood was, we've seen this before. They extended Alexander Georgiev, who is a pleasant surprise. They extended him, and then it turned out they extended him a bit too far. Not that I'm putting that on Mackenzie Blackwood. I'm just saying to have a young goaltender that you develop and stick with and, have a concession plan if, things go awry with the goaltenders you have now, I think it would be wise. So my earnest hope is that Ilya Nabokov is not traded because the Colorado Avalanche, once again, are needing to find someone to add to their top six. Just do that in free agency by signing Brock Nelson. Speaking of hockey, get back to what transpired with the Stars last night. But from the 719, you're asking the wrong questions. You're asking questions about losers like Dallas. Let's instead talk about the winners and why they won in 5. You talk about the Stars like you talk about the Avs, like the home team. Get with the program. First of all, aggressive. Second of all, this is the way it works. Like, first of all, Mikko Rantanen plays for the Dallas Stars. Okay, so there is a local connection here. The Stars beat the Avs, so it is of note to Avalanche fans what fate befalls the Dallas Stars. But in a more general sense, this is how it works. The day after is about the team that lost, knowing that the team that won is going to have their spotlight very soon. In fact, I would feel more of a reason to talk about the Oilers today if the NHL wouldn't wait a week to start the Stanley Cup final. I don't get this. The NFL is in college football is the only sport that you can wait a week to play games. Let's get it moving. I don't like, Nuggets turning around and playing 36 hours. There's a balance, right? There's a happy medium here. You don't wait a week to start the Stanley Cup final. Why are they waiting? Start it Sunday. What's going on Sunday that I'm missing? Because I get Pacers Knicks. Game 6 will be tomorrow, which means game 7 will be Monday. Yeah. What about Sunday? Let's get this thing rolling. And it went through this with the Nuggets and the Avalanche when they were playing it in their respective finals in 22 and 23. Why are we waiting so long? Edmonton's going to have their day, but since you brought them up, my biggest thing about this Stanley Cup rematch, and a lot of people are picking up on this, is it possible that both of these teams are better than they were a year ago? I mean, Edmonton has a lot of the same personnel, but they have a few guys who seem to have taken their game to another level in these playoffs. And then Florida, it's easier to pick out why they're better. They acquired Brad Marchand. They acquired Seth Jones in season. But I think this series is going to be epic. And when you juxtapose it to what's happening in the NBA, not that I'm all for OKC Indiana. I might be the only one. I'm good with it. I'm looking forward to it. I like the matchup. My issue with the NBA, and the NHL is a great example of this, I don't grow tired of watching a team play for a title after 1 year. This is not the worst matchup the NHL could have. In fact, it's a great matchup. It's a great matchup. I want to see the rematch. As close as the Oilers were last year, as epic of a series as that is, with Connor McDavid trying to win his first Stanley Cup, and the contrasting styles between Florida and Edmonton, I love it. It's a great matchup. And that's been my point with the NBA. I don't have a problem with parity, but I do like to see teams that I'm more familiar with that have a little bit of a history here. Like Indiana and OKC, for many people, are showing up out of nowhere, and then they're going to be gone. They're going to be gone because that's the way it works in today's NBA. I don't know that we have to have dynasties. I certainly don't want super teams in any league. But it's okay to have a rematch. It's okay to have a team like Florida who's been here 3 straight times. I don't have a problem with it. I think both of these NBA finals, Indiana, OKC, if Indiana wins, either tomorrow night or in game 7, and in Florida, Edmonton, I think they're both going to be fun series. I don't think the NBA finals is going to go nearly as long as the Stanley Cup final, but I'm interested. I mean, Indiana, the number 1 offense against the number 1 defense. Both teams like to play fast. Rising stars in Shea and Tyrese Halliburton, not to mention, some of the other players like Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. I'm good with this matchup, but I do like the fact that there's some history between Florida and Edmonton. And I would have to say that of the 2 series, even though I'm interested in both, I'm kind of more looking forward to the Stanley Cup final than the NBA finals. I like those storylines carrying over from the year before. Canada, once again, on the precipice of winning their first Stanley Cup in forever. Matthew Tkachuk and Connor McDavid, they have the star power. They have the Canada versus United States dynamic. They have the history. It's great. Obviously, the Colorado Avalanche would have been better coming out of the West for many reasons. But I think this series is going to be awesome. I think it's going to be a long series, too. Again, like it was last year. But that's the way it works. Immediate aftermath. What about the losing team? Because we know the winning team, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about them. And we will. Got a whole week before they even play. I don't even have another game to talk about in the NHL for another week. You let me know what you think of your Oilers. 719-247-1313. But what happened last night, and we'll get back to it after the top of the hour with the Dallas Stars. Like, that's the bigger story last night, unequivocally. Which is why I led with it. Shifting gears here. Saw this from Brett Yormark. You know, two different things are happening right now. And I just have to laugh because it is so college sports. So right now, we're waiting for this House settlement to take effect. Right? And in July, all of this is supposed to start being instituted. And there's a hang up as far as, you know, there were going to be roster cut downs, but then the judge wanted some players grandfathered in because she felt like that was a little bit cold and unfair to them that have roster spots, to have them immediately taken away, to kind of start to phase in the roster limits. And because college athletic departments, even though they print money, can't wait to find ways to help their bottom line even more, they started making these cuts already. And they're like, wait a minute, we got to give them their roster spots back? We already cut them. Yeah, well, you jumped the gun. You know how this works. You don't have to do anything. You're not supposed to do anything until the judge tells you to. You're making some assumptions, and you know what happens when you make assumptions. So we have that on one side. And that, to be fair, when it comes to college athletics, is the far more consequential happening. Like, it's going to fundamentally change this sport. There's going to be a commissioner. There are going to be roster limits. There's this budget or this salary cap that they're going to have to distribute. Like, you're going to have a quarterback making, you know, $50 million. That's too much, but $50 million, and the guy catching the passes from him might make a third of that. And what impact this has on the Olympic sports and all this kind of stuff, which, by the way, it should have no impact. It should have no impact. They should be able to continue to carry the Olympic sports. They choose not to. Do not forget that when all of this does start happening. They're doing it voluntarily. Don't listen to them when they're saying we don't have enough money. They do. But they will use this as an excuse to cut Olympic sports. At least a few institutions will. You watch. But this is the far more consequential thing. This is the far more real world, if you want to call it that, happening with college athletics. And yet, what's dominating the headlines? Expansion of the college football playoff and expansion of the NCAA tournament. We got to find some way to make up this money. They were always going to expand these playoffs because there's going to be more money to be made. We know this. Even the professional sports do this. Why is there a play-in in the NBA? Why is there a 7th seed in both the AFC and the NFC? Money. I knew they were going to do this. And just for the record, I don't think that the college football playoff nor the NCAA tournament, especially the NCAA tournament, needs to be expanded. Absolutely not. I thought the college football playoff actually expanded too much to begin with. 4 to 12 was too much. And now they're going to go to 16. And they're taking away, automatic buys for conference champions. And then the NCAA tournament is going to be like the postseason in the movie Basketball. Ever see that movie made by the South Park guys, Basketball? Where by the end of it, Bob Costas has a full beard and he's ragged because the postseason has gone on for months. That's going to be March Madness. They're going to have 250 teams in, and it's going to water down the product so much. But I'm mentally prepared for that. But it's just funny, there's these real world things that have real ramifications to the future of not just college football or college basketball, college athletics as a whole. And it seems like they're more preoccupied. They being the powers that be, the conference commissioners, are more worried about expanding their postseasons. But Brett Yormark, commissioner of the Big 12, did say he's good with the 16-team playoff, the 5+11, but said he wanted to make sure that the Big 10 and the SEC, they know that they're looking out for everyone in college football. Great responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. Man, to be Brett Yormark, you got to feel so powerful, but so powerless at the same time. You're powerful in your inner circle. You're the conference commissioner. But you know that you are powerless to stop the SEC and the Big Ten from doing whatever they want. But I know why Brett Yormark is saying this. He's saying this because expanding the playoff is a clear ploy to get more Big Ten and SEC teams in. That's what it's going to be. It's not going to be more Boise States getting in. It's not even going to be more Big 12 teams. It's not going to mean CU's getting in. Although, as long as they have Deion Sanders, they will be a compelling inclusion if they meet their requirements. But this is all aimed in, same with the NCAA tournament. Look at the SEC this year. They have every reason in their heads to believe that we should get our entire conference into this tournament. Why are we worried about Wright State and UMBC? Let's get Vandy in there. Yeah, I don't know what all is going to happen. There's been a lot of chatter that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to announce that they're leaving the NCAA. I've been hearing that. But July, all this stuff is supposed to happen by July. By July, we'll have expanded playoffs in these two sports, and we'll have all of this house settlement stuff figured out, and a commissioner of college athletics. It's going to be a very different world about a month from now. And as always, college athletics looks either woefully unprepared to enact the changes, or they're jumping the gun on changes that they may have to go back and undo. Coming up next, 3 stories that are driving the show here on Extra Sports 1300. Hello there. Welcome in. Drive Time Sports on this Friday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Appreciate you tuning in, whether it's on your radio, online, or through the Extra Sports 1300 app. And now streaming live on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300. The number, if you want to get involved, 719-247-1313. You could call or text that number, or you could tweet at me at Gingerly Tweets. Let's start the hour with the three biggest stories of the day. All right, we start with the Dallas Stars gassing out at the finish line.
I didn't take that lightly, and I didn't blame it all on Jake. But the reality is if you go back to last year's playoffs, he's lost 6 to 7 games to Edmonton, and we gave up 2 shots on 2 goals in an elimination game.
Pete DeBoer last night. First, he embarrassed his franchise goaltender by pulling him after just 2 shots on goal. By the way, those shots on goal, one was on the Oiler power play, and one was a breakaway for Edmonton. But those goals, Pete DeBoer had seen enough. It would have been a risky move. It would have been ill-advised if it would have just been for the normal reasons why coaches pull goalies. Right, to try and spark the team, because this is Jake Ottinger. He's on a different level of goaltending. He's one of the elite goaltenders in the league. You got to be extra careful when you're pulling that guy out of the game. So it was a questionable decision in the moment, but far more questionable was Pete DeBoer then turning around and throwing Jake Ottinger right under the Greyhound bus after the game. That was shocking. And it brings up the question, like, if you had so little faith in your franchise goaltender against the Edmonton Oilers, which it's clear that you did, and you're willing to pull him just 2 shots into the game, why don't you just start Casey DeSmith? Why don't you use game 4 and say, we got to make a change? It's not good enough. That would be slightly more acceptable than the way Pete DeBoer handled this. He completely bungled this. And he talks about a large sample size for Jake Ottinger against the Edmonton Oilers. How about the fact that Pete DeBoer the last 7 years has lost in the conference finals 6 times? And the 1 year that he didn't lose in the conference finals, he didn't even make the playoffs. So do you really want to talk about large sample sizes and what should be enough to make a seemingly rash decision? Because you got way more of a track record of flaming out at this very stage of the playoffs year in and year out than Jake Ottinger does. And I don't want to be too much of a prisoner of the moment. But the more I think about it, like, how is that relationship going to be mended? Alongside Mikko Rantanen and Miro Heiskanen, this is your best player. This is in many ways the face of your team. And you were calling him out after you embarrassed him by yanking him just 2 shots into the game. So either Jake Ottinger will prove to be the greatest human being on planet Earth and will turn the cheek in a way that I have never seen an athlete do, to be chucked under the bus and then be okay with that coach the next year. Or Dallas needs to think long and hard about making a change. because that sounded like a guy who had become unhinged. That 6 conference finals losses in 7 years got to Pete DeBoer. That being absolutely dominated by the Edmonton Oilers for 5 games. 4 of those 5 games, if we're being fair. Got to him. That's what it looked like. It looked like Pete DeBoer lost it. If you're going to lose it on somebody who's far less consequential to your team than Jake Ottinger, who, by the way, they don't get to the conference finals without Jake Ottinger. They don't beat the Colorado Avalanche and get out of the first round without Jake Ottinger. That was stunning, that entire evening, and it was an epic flame out. Epic flame out from the Dallas Stars. And if you're an Avalanche fan, and I've seen plenty of you on social media, this can't make up for losing to Dallas, but gosh, it makes it feel a little bit better. Watching that team do that in the Western Conference Finals and see their coach comport himself the way he did, whew. Just add it to the mix in Dallas. They were supposed to be the functional franchise. You had the Mavericks, you had the Cowboys. The Dallas Stars were this bastion of stability and common sense. Not anymore. Remarkable the way Dallas bowed out of these playoffs, and we will get a rematch between Edmonton and Florida in a rematch of an epic series last year, and I expect nothing less. In fact, it could be a little bit better because I think both of these teams are better than they were a year ago. I like it. I like it better than I like the NBA Finals. It's not a negative to have a team you've already seen play for a title, even 2 of them. NHL knows that. NBA clearly doesn't for some reason. Story number 2, David Adelman not wasting much time and not messing around, clearing out his coaching staff. Not all the way, but everyone whose contract was up at the end of this month, gone. Ryan Saunders, his defensive coordinator, gone. Popeye Jones, gone. Stephen Graham, Charles Klask as well. Now, I don't expect you... Popeye and Ryan Saunders, and if you're a Oklahoma State Cowboys fan, you should remember Stephen Graham. But I think the biggest takeaway here is that the Nuggets did need a culture change, as much as Josh Kroenke maybe wanted to minimize that. This is not a small reset. You got rid of your GM. You got rid of your longtime head coach, both of which were in their current posts when they won a title. You make David Adelman your next head coach, and he proceeds to give the axe to a handful of his assistants. That is a culture change. And don't think for a second that some of what's been talked about with Michael Malone and kind of wearing on the players, I'm sure there were assistants on his staff that did the same thing. So this is a change of culture, at the very least in the leadership positions in the organization. But where they go, not that we normally pay as much attention to basketball assistant coaches as we do in the NFL, but it will be interesting to see how David Adelman fills out his coaching staff, because he is a first-time head coach. Right? Is he going to get more experienced guys? Are they going to have some name recognition to them? Or is he going to get younger coaches? It will be interesting to see how he fills out the coaching staff, but I would imagine that more than one of the guys that he ends up hiring will have player development under strengths on his resume. We're all wondering how much David Adelman's going to buy in to the player development invest in Deron Holmes and Peyton Watson and all these young guys, delegating that to your assistants is probably a pretty good way to go. I think they'll go heavy on player development, and if there is a notable name, it will be one of two things. It will either be a college head coach that you know that will make his way to the NBA to help with player development, or it will be someone who is going to be hailed as the defensive coordinator, quote unquote, for the Denver Nuggets. Like, think Jeff Van Gundy. It won't be Jeff Van Gundy, but think about somebody like that. So I predict one name out of the assistants that David Adelman hires that you go, oh, I know that guy. But it was probably going to happen, all of this. But let's not forget the general manager position. That's what's the important one here. Still waiting on that. But for now, David Adelman cleaning house when it comes to his assistant coaches. Then you have the Nuggets roommates, subject of story number 3, the goaltender of the future, signing on the dotted line, Ilya Nabokov, signing a 2-year entry-level contract with the Colorado Avalanche. He is one of the highest drafted goalies that the Avalanche have, I think, ever had. Racking my brain, I think they drafted Nabokov as high as anybody. But his name's been bandied about a little bit. Now, the goaltender room is pretty settled in Colorado for now, but Scott Wedgwood is a free agent after this upcoming season. You can kind of see the succession plan coming into place, right? You go Wedgwood and Blackwood for another year. Wedgwood walks away. You plug in Nabokov as Mackenzie Blackwood's backup. And then you kind of see how things go, and maybe there will be a day in the next couple of years where maybe Nabokov is the starting goalie of the Colorado Avalanche. But the first step is to get him to sign his entry-level deal, which he has today. So let that be the first move of the offseason for the Colorado Avalanche. Not their most notable, but it is their first. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the 3 stories that are driving the show, and we'll continue with the program next. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. A lot of talk. It's one of our favorite pastimes this time of year to discuss second-year players and which ones will take a jump in their second year. And we've had some recent examples with the Denver Broncos of this happening. Nick Bonitto, Marvin Mims. So who will it be this year? Your options if you need a refresher. There is Bo Nix. Remember him? Bo Nix. You have Nix, Jonah Ellis, Troy Franklin, Chris Abrams-Drain. See, even still on the team. Audric Estime and Devon Vele. So which one of those do you think will make the biggest jump? I think the only issue with Jonah Ellis, and it's more even a reason I kept talking about Nick Bonitto when it comes to Von Miller, that's really not the comparison. It's Jonah Ellis. Like bringing in Von Miller, which he shot down those rumors the other day that he was going to play for the Broncos this year. Well, it weren't really rumors. He just said he wasn't going to. It really would come at the expense of a Jonah Ellis. I think the choice is pretty clear because who takes the next step or takes a step forward is really based on who has an opportunity. Like we could say Bo Nix, he's going to play every snap this upcoming season, but we know that being a second-year quarterback, a lot of quarterbacks don't progress year one to year two. They flatten out or they regress. And then year three becomes the make or break year in their development. There are opportunities to me for Audric Estime and Troy Franklin. There's just nobody in those respective rooms outside of Cortland Sutton that you say has to get touches in the running game or the passing game. And in the passing game, the way the NFL is, certainly there's room for another wide receiver opposite Cortland Sutton. So really the choice to me, because Jonah Ellis can still take a bit of a step forward, but the opportunity isn't there. He's not being out Cooper or Nick Bonitto. He's still going to be used, I think, sparingly. Not sparingly, but certainly not as much as those two guys. But hey, if I'm Sean Payton and I'm looking at my running back room and my wide receiver room, I'm saying it's up for grabs. Nobody has a job. Bo Nix has a job. The offensive linemen, they have jobs. Most of the people on the defense, they have jobs. You can spare me we want competition at every position stuff. The Broncos have most of their roster, most of their starters spoken for. But if I'm in the running back room or I'm in the wide receiver room, I'm Sean Payton. I'm telling you, any one of you guys can play. If you show out, and I guess I need to throw in Marvin Mims into the mix as well with the wide receivers. You have Cortland Sutton, you have Marvin Mims, but there's a very specific role that Marvin Mims plays. I think it's Audric Estime. With kind of combining opportunity with some level of belief. I'm just not as high on Troy Franklin as a lot of people are. I did think for a while that maybe Bo Nix would be more willing to throw him the football and maybe there would be something. Sean Payton shot that down the first day he could. And he was right. But I think there's certainly more opportunity in the running back room because even though there's opportunity for other wide receivers, you do have Sutton, you do have Mims. But Estime, I think with the draft, nobody should be happier about the drafting of RJ Harvey than Audric Estime. Because if they went Omarion Hampton in round 1, if they got Ashton Genty, that would be bad news for Audric Estime. But now you have a running back in RJ Harvey who fills a role, who brings a specific skill set. Certainly not somebody that you would even think could be a bell cow back at the NFL level. Not that there are many of them remaining. But by drafting RJ Harvey, you could see the vision, Audric Estime and RJ Harvey complementing each other a little bit. And I said this yesterday, with Javonte Williams carries, they're not just going to go to one guy. Right? You kind of throw those into the pot, and then Sean Payton will divvy them out as he sees fit. Now, neither Estime nor RJ Harvey are just going to automatically carry the ball as much as Javonte Williams did last year. I think the most likely candidate is Audric Estime, and I think he has to be. And I think Sean Payton's kind of banking on it. I don't think he's banking on Troy Franklin taking a step forward. I think he'd like to. I think he's going to try to help him take a step forward, but I think there's much more of Sean Payton putting hope into Audric Estime than Troy Franklin. And he said that Estime is going to get carries. But Estime will have to do the most he can with those carries. But I think if you're looking at a second-year player most likely to take a step forward, or take the biggest step forward, I'll say, because I think you can see improvement in some areas from all of these guys. But I think the answer is Audric Estime, and I see Troy Franklin being the one hyped up a little bit. Maybe. I mean, it's not like you would absolutely say Pat Bryant above Troy Franklin or Devon Vele above Troy Franklin. But if I'm backing one guy, one second-year player on the Broncos to make the biggest jump this year, step forward, is Audric Estime. I don't think Audric Estime has top running back in him, but certainly there will be more opportunities, some goal line carries. So I think that would be the guy I'd look at, but he's going to have to prove that 1 year he has on RJ Harvey is enough to earn those carries, because I think Sean Payton very much likes RJ Harvey, clearly. Biggest step forward for a second-year Denver Bronco. I'll go Audric Estime. You let me know who you think. 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. Speaking of the Switchbacks, tomorrow night, they'll be in action against El Paso Locomotive. Jägermeister Cup. I'll tell you one thing that my cup rarely, if ever, had in it was Jägermeister. But we appreciate their sponsorship of this fine soccer tournament going on. It's like the NBA Cup, basically. So it's a normal regular season game, but it's like that plus. So that's kind of what tomorrow is, 7:00, right here on Extra Sports 1300. So now that the Stars are out, the Avs won the trade, right? All's well, that ends well. Mikko Rantanen, poor series against Edmonton, no other way to slice it, but he doesn't end up winning the Conn Smythe or the Stanley Cup. Doesn't even get a play for it. Not quite, because you still got to deal with that guy that's going to look to rip your heart out every single time you play each other, and you tend to play each other a whole lot. And I talked about this yesterday, that this idea that, Mikko Rantanen, not that guy. Like, maybe he's not the guy, but he did plenty of damage against the Colorado Avalanche. And if you have a really good team, he was supposed to put that team over the top. He didn't. But his coach is yanking the goalie 2 goals into the game, and nobody is producing beneath Mikko Rantanen on the depth chart. So, yeah, I'm still defending Mikko Rantanen. I still think that the jury is out on all of this. I think getting Brock Nelson to come back is a necessary step in this to see if ultimately the Avalanche accomplish what they set out to accomplish by trading Mikko Rantanen. But think just because the Oilers were able to knock out Mikko Rantanen, that suddenly solved the Avalanche issues against that hockey team. That is not true. Not true. I am interested, though, speaking of matchups that local teams don't seem to be able to ever win. I didn't really talk about it in the wake of Minnesota losing to OKC. What's going to happen with the Wolves? Like, I don't think the Nuggets would have beaten the Wolves. I don't. Maybe I'm in the minority on that. I don't think they would have. But now you have Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Julius Randle. We're all going to be free agents. Can you keep 2 of them? Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I think, is the guy that you let go. I'm not so sure that Naz Reid shouldn't be in some way more of a priority than Julius Randle. At least if I'm looking through it through the lens of what makes the Nuggets' lives more difficult, Naz Reid makes their life more difficult than Julius Randle. But what Tim Connolly does with this Wolves team, it's going to be interesting, because there's a possibility here that the Wolves next year are not the matchup problem for the Denver Nuggets that they have been, and the Nuggets wouldn't even have to make any moves in order to make it happen. Now, if they just end up losing Nickeil Alexander-Walker, then forget everything I said. The Wolves can absolutely still be a bad matchup for the Denver Nuggets. But if Julius Randle or Naz Reid somehow escape Minnesota, that would be good news for the Denver Nuggets. I think, although it's like cutting off the head of a hydra. Okay, maybe Minnesota let's say that they lose Naz Reid. And now the Nuggets can beat the Wolves. All right, well, you still have OKC. You have Houston that's going to have a year under their belt. Maybe with Giannis. If not there, then maybe San Antonio, which would accelerate their timeline. And can you imagine Nikola Jokic having to deal with Wemby and Giannis for a 7-game series? So this doesn't change anything in terms of what needs to be done with the Denver Nuggets. Waiting for other teams to fade and to drop off is not a winning strategy. The Nuggets, when they ultimately won a title, they went for it. They landed Aaron Gordon. That was a going for it move. And we had to wait a couple years while Jamal Murray rehabbed from the ACL, but then they got it done. You can't just expect teams to fall off while you still hang on to the game's best player and hope that that gets you back. You got to be proactive about it. So maybe Minnesota loses something and maybe they aren't quite the matchup for the Denver Nuggets that they have been in the last couple of years. But trust me, there's another team behind them and maybe another. And there's the whole Oklahoma City Thunder of it all that you're going to have to deal with. And I want to temper things a little bit with OKC because the Grim Reaper that is the second luxury tax apron, it's coming for them as well. I think the OKC window to be this is this year and next year. And then they're going to be less than. It's kind of like Boston. Right? Boston was going to be Boston last year and Boston this year. Then Tatum gets hurt. But let's be fair to the Knicks. They had them beat. But then Tatum gets hurt. And now the Celtics are not going to be that team next year. I look at it the same way for Oklahoma City. They're a wagon this year. They'll, barring injury, they'll be a wagon next year. And then the financial fair play rules will come into effect and they'll lose people. But that's why yesterday I talked about how the Nuggets really became a championship team in 2021, that there are some parallels between this Thunder team and that Nuggets team in 2021. Jamal Murray just ripped his ACL. And then they had to spend one championship season getting bounced by Phoenix. The next year, Steph going sleepy night-night on him. And then they got Jamal Murray back and won a title. And now they're facing, I mean, it all fits, right? That's actually a more open window than I'm giving OKC or Boston's going to have. Nuggets had 3 years. And now second round exit, stalling out, maybe regressing in some ways, bloated roster, top heavy, can't pay everybody. That's why change needs to be made, if at all possible. But OKC for next year isn't going anywhere, just like Boston. And then after that, things are going to it'll be interesting what Sam Presti does. But at the same time, but it's the Thunder as currently constructed. What's scary about them is that they have Nikola Topic, who missed the entire season because they didn't need him. But he was hurt, obviously. But they're going to get him. They have draft picks this year. That's the thing. And they're not the Thunders. They're other people's. So they're better. The problem with the Nuggets is that in some ways they had to use their own picks in order to get some of these guys, whereas the Thunder get to use other people's picks. I guess the Nuggets traded up but you get my point. Like, the Thunder aren't going to be, all their picks in the next couple of years aren't going to be in 20s. So they have a chance to supplement the roster and maybe maybe do what the Nuggets were trying to do, but do it better. But as far as this Thunder team is concerned, that will tip off the NBA Finals, I believe, on Thursday of next week. Why we wait so long? They're going to be this year and this next year, and then they're going to have to change things a little bit. Think that's it. Yep. That's all I got for you today. Appreciate you tuning in, joining me all week. Shorter week because of the holiday. We'll be back for a full 5 days next week. Don't forget Switchbacks in El Paso tomorrow night at 7. Would love to talk to you then. If not, I will talk to you on Monday. Enjoy your weekend.